Is this Yeti?
Yeah. You have to plug in. I think there's an audio cable if you want to use it as a speaker as well.
Oh. That's probably a good idea.
You don't need it.
Well, I think Aaron might want to participate, actually. There's another wire.
Is there?
I think you only had one wire.
Oh, yes. I have Fedora hex stickers for anybody who wants one. Can you just use the laptop speakers?
Oh.
Like,
You can, if you want. Or you can use the microphone. If you
Well, I don't think we have the cable.
What cable? Oh, there's a cable for the microphone, or this?
This is.
That's audio
Yeah,
from. We can use the audio if we want to use the speakers for.
But that's.
oh, actually, it should just work.
Exactly.
Huh? It probably works. Why do you think it works?
Well, it said like play a test sound, and I didn't hear anything.
Oh, well, that's an audio. This is the microphone, not the speakers. The volume is way low.
No, I just finished just 4.
Good point.
17.
Oh, because we're using that as an audio output device. Are we supposed to use that as an audio output device?
The speaker sucks, so.
Speaker sex, don't do it.
Yeah, it's
Default.
insert into Mochik repository. Oh, yeah, that's exception to see.
And we can plug that in here if we want it to be super loud.
Let's wait, give it a shot.
I mean, I don't know what we have to do to turn those on. Should we try to see if it just works?
For the MySQL.
Yeah.
All right, Postgres finished after 17 million.
Finished. Meaning.
Well, there was an error that's a generic. There was a SQL error called get next exception to see what the real cause was. So we might need to run it again with get next exception.
How long did that take? 17 minutes.
564,000 seconds. I'll have to do a little bit of math.
Get better.
151 hours, so 6 days.
It's probably fine.
Probably fine enough.
You'll be able to hear him if he says anything.
Yeah.
The rest of us.
So maybe Esme, if you can get in touch with Aaron.
Oh, sorry. I
Just hit save and we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely making-
All right.
Is there a hangout or something?
It's on the agenda.
Oh, there's a hangout on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here is the agenda. It's fairly slim. Hey there.
Okay.
Well.
Not emotionally.
Are
I know 15 minutes ago we were looking for you, but okay.
you like support?
What do you want?
No,
Is there a problem?
no, we finally got on the internet, so I guess that was the main thing. Through not this computer. I think we're good. This is fine.
Declan's the program chair for workshops. I'm not the program chair for anything wrong.
Yeah. Thanks. I think there are a couple other people that like AJS6F.
I don't think I'm ever going to meet him.
That's all right.
It doesn't really exist. I know he's coming to this thing. I mean, you gotta think it's gonna get down.
Yeah, and I had dinner with him last night.
Oh, so he's actually here. Okay, so some of the problem space is eliminated. Physically is here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been in Salem one time.
What they do is AJS is that.
Yeah, like refining clothes.
I work with it. Tear off the mask and the salted fish pouring out.
So yeah, sorry for the delay. Let's go ahead and get started. Maybe I think it would be helpful if the configuration is not really great for sort of going around the room, but we'll do what we can. Just in terms of introductions, and as noted here, it would be interesting to sort of hear from you what your relationship is with Fedora, whatever that might mean. If that's you historically have used Fedora 3, you are or are planning on using Fedora 4. If you are using it, maybe like what context are you using Fedora 4? Likewise with Fedora 3. If you're like planning on it but you haven't done it, maybe if you can speak to what's between now and then. When you are actually using it, just in any sort of background, I think it's worth kind of getting a sense of the room. So I'll begin. And so there is one person here who's in Vermont, and Aaron Coburn. For those of you who sort of keep in touch with what goes on, Aaron's pretty engaged and wanted to participate, but he couldn't show up in person. So this is his proxy. So we'll try to include him in what we're doing right now. But once he wakes up, I think he said he's going to wake up in 10 minutes. All right. So I'm Andrew Woods, the Fedora tech lead at Duraspace.
You don't run a repository.
Am I missing anything?
You don't run a repository, so.
Yeah, I run a couple of repositories, but mostly for myself.
They're DSpace.
They'll come to DM, obviously.
All right.
Andy Wagner, University of Toronto. I inherited Fedora 3 and Fedora 1 stack, which reduced the process of completely rebuilding to actually scale. As soon as that's done, I've got a pilot project to do a Fedora 4 repository with books, digitized books that through the Internet Archive we've digitized but don't actually have local copies of. So that's going to be our first Fedora 4 pilot.
So when is that?
As soon as I get Fedora 1 and Fedora 3 production scalable, which is a month ago. So month or two, 3 months.
Really? No, I mean, it's pretty soon.
Yeah, that's my next, after I've dealt with the backlog of debt, or at least a portion.
Or it might never happen, right?
This is a possibility.
Okay. So we're doing this summer and never.
I'm Esme Coles with Princeton. We have one application using Fedora 3 that's sort of a small project, and it's in a custom XML database-based global repository. We're working on a hybrid head right now to replace that, and we'll be migrating sometime, probably starting in the next month, to get that set up. And so we're keenly interested in testing Fedora 4 and scalability and all of that right now, because we expect to start putting it through its paces very soon.
And what does the migration look like?
The migration is a rake task that loads nets files and pulls files from disk and metadata from our catalog mostly. So it's kind of pulling pieces from the corners of our custom system and putting them in Hydra.
What's in your repository?
Mostly manuscripts. There are some other graphic arts, posters, and printed books and things, but the core of our collections are manuscripts. So we have Universal Viewer, IIIF is a big part of our stack too on the front end.
Is it-
I'm Matthias Latsum with this Karlsruhe. We're not running a repository. I'm not a developer, so I'm not from a library, so I'm a total alien here. But we've been working with Fedora since 2004, so for over a decade, before we decided to replace it with something else. And now I'm back and looking how Fedora is actually progressing and if it's becoming an option for us again.
Is Frank?
Frank left,
Frank left?
so in other developers.
It seemed like you had early on with Fedora Force, sort of issues around scalability in
Yeah.
particular.
It was more like that we wanted to run it in a clustered environment with several nodes, so not just a failover configuration, but to ensure that we get enough throughput during ingest and also during if you want to analyze data or something like that and you want to retrieve massive amounts of data. And when we did our testing, which was probably 18 months ago, or more, that didn't work out very well.
But those requirements still exist for you.
Actually not.
So the stack has changed in 18 months and your requirements have changed.
Right.
But, good to have you here. Yeah. It seems like any event that's Fedora related, I don't think it's fair for you to say that you're alien. Matthias has been around forever. John?
John Dixon, University of Texas at Austin Libraries. We're running probably 3 or 4 Fedora Island OR stacks at the moment, 2 or 3. There are some other people on campus also running Island OR stack. At this point, we're probably still with Island OR, and so we have to look at what we can do going forward towards Fedora 4. We are starting to do
You
some
should talk
stuff.
to Nick.
With our 3 programmers for the complete library, it's time is an issue. But we are trying to do some stuff with our metadata that we're putting for Fedora 3, using more URIs to sort of Fedora 4, and some of that is a little more straightforward. Most of our repositories are special collections at the library. We're actually presenting one from the cultural heritage thing, Latin American digital histories from South America, or Nicaragua. Most of them are image related. Some books, newspapers.
All right. I'm just sort of curious, Alendora leaning? So I assume, Nick, that and Diego and you guys will be talking about, like how to rally the troops to help move Claw in the 4-4 direction. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But the other interesting thing, the university is starting work on the dams for the university as a whole. So my boss, Aaron, is leading on that. But that is still, they're still talking.
Fedora 3 Alendora Discovery Garden.
No. We've had several contracts with them, and not all of them have worked out.
Thanks, John. Nick?
Nick Roy, York University. We are in Island OR shop. Fedora 3 closing in on 1 million objects. Normal Fedora. But I'm also the project director for Island OR Claw, which is the 4.4 Island OR integration. We'll be presenting on that. Thursday? Wednesday?
Thursday.
Someday. So yeah, if you want to work on it, talk to me. We have to do it as a community, otherwise it's not going to get done. basically it.
Thanks, Dick.
No problem.
I'm Jeff Lee, developer for Innovative. We have an offering. It's been around for a while. So I guess my main thrust. Currently, we're built off of Fedora 3, and we're trying to make the case to both our management and to customers that it's worth it for them to move to Fedora 4. Existing customers, we want to. I think the main problem we've had is this vague sense that, okay, my repository solution works great today. I've got no problems with it. What is going to motivate me to what's the value proposition? I'd rather have functionality, or why introduce this uncertainty into something that's so so it's kind of a two-pronged thing. They convince management to give us the time to do it, time and resources to do it. Core product, obviously, to have a good migration strategy. And I guess the other challenge is that at least some of our customers have written custom tools against Fedora 3 implementation details. They expect objects and data streams directory. They built based on proximal structure and things like that. So convincing those kinds of customers, either helping them rewrite their tools, or just convincing them to rewrite them to not lose anything that they have today, basically.
Yeah, it seems like that's a tricky situation when people start going underneath the application and building dependencies. It's hard to help.
And it's hard to track that. It's hard for us to track that too. We know some of the efforts, but we don't have a good sense of whether we don't want to roll something out and then the customer complains loudly, wow, all the stuff doesn't work against this new repository. So finding those various paths, I think, will be different for different customers. So it's a challenge managing that the whole effort. But, from my perspective, we want to go there. There's no sense in staying on a product line or the 3.x line that's not going to be maintained by anybody. We don't want to fork it.
And Ben couldn't even make it yet.
Yeah, right. So you might as well leverage with the people who know. I think leveraging the community going forward is the only answer. Make people understand that.
So you guys are still in the point of just trying to get over the Fedora 3 to Fedora 4 hump.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I feel like I want to be farther along the curve at this point, but another thing is, stories from the field are obviously going to be success stories will be great to take back to customers.
Yeah. Well, so I saw you last year, right, in Indianapolis. So please, be in touch. To the degree that the community can help. I think it's part of a community, right?
Sure.
Not just
priority-wise, things shift a little bit. We got a new CEO and things like that, so some other things to attend to. But the good news is, I think we have more resources than we did last year to potentially give back.
Cool.
We are looking for those opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Good, Jeff.
And I work for the Publications Office of the European Union. When you look for any European Union law, it's very likely that you will arrive in its website called URLEX, which is a gigantic Fedora 3. We have 120 million objects, 18 terabytes, and around 7 million gigs per day, with peaks of 20 million gigs in a single day.
Of peaks of what?
20 million hits per day. And that's it. We are stuck in Fedora 3.8. The point is that migrating such amount of data is not easy because we cannot stop the server.
Yeah.
And therefore, probably would need not less than a month for migrating and running both servers at the same time, and they should be escalated at the same time. So, not easy. It's our contractor who is dealing with that right now. And I know they are asking questions to the Fedora group. It's a note from Aris.
So all the Fedora work is contracted out?
It is included in an application which acts as an envelope, like probably like Alendora, but it's called the seller. We have been struggling as well with the cheaper store and with other things. But
What's the name of the contractor?
it's Aris, ARHS. ARHS.
Yeah, because I think that's something that the Fedora community struggles with is having service providers, people that support Fedora. So
Well, actually, they are developing somewhat Fedora, but not Fedora itself, because they know very little about Fedora. And for that, we have another contract with Frank Asik. You might know from Kosovo. No?
Frank?
Asik.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. I know that guy. Oh, cool. Thanks. Peter?
So I'm Peter Sefton. I'm currently with the University of Technology in Sydney. I've been involved in quite a few different Fedora projects over the years, including an attempted complete stack that didn't really work. The Fascinator, and I've worked on an Alendora project and a Hydra project where I talked about that in Helsinki. It was a big research data archive for mostly linguistic data, and we pulled Fedora 3 out of it because of huge performance problems. So it remains a Hydra app without Fedora underneath it. So currently we're really focusing on research data, and I'm giving a talk on Wednesday, I think, which is very inconclusive. I'd really like feedback about what we should be doing, but we're kind of looking at having a Fedora 4. The institution I'm with now has Fedora 3 instance, which is a kind of, it's a headless, just standalone store. It doesn't have a lot of data in it, but it's meant to be linked to a research data catalog. And we think we'd probably keep that pattern and put in Fedora 4 and have it talk to other services. So standalone repository with forms on the front where you put things in, which sort of works really well for works for publications. Doesn't look like it really works in a broad spectrum of things that people do in research data land, where you've got instruments and you've got people writing code, and you've got just the idea that they will go to a place and upload something into your form is a bit far-fetched. So we're looking at a kind of switchboard, of network of services with a Fedora in the middle for archiving things, and also as a kind of hub for indexing stuff. So populating an index of things that are coming from other places. So it's a bit inconclusive, and I thought we'd be a bit further along, but I really came here to ask questions about a few Fedora details that we want to understand.
And so you've been building this with Fedora 4?
So we're at the testing stage at the moment. We've got Fedora 4. We've been writing building a Python API so that we can test it. We think Python's important for researchers because it's one of the main research languages. So we've started a little API project, and we're going to test hooking up Fedora 4 to various things. So there's a thing called MyCardis, which came out of the Australian government funding rounds that does instrument data. It's hooked up to the synchrotron at Monash. And we think that people will use that as a kind of working repository. And we want to have Fedora pulling data from systems like that.
All right.
We're also interested in a Mecha, which is really, really simple repository, really, really easy for people to set things up. And we'd like to be able to let people run the Mecha instance for a couple of years and then be able to archive the contents in a structured way into Fedora, and various other use cases that let people do things that are appropriate to their discipline, but we can kind of rescue the content and keep it. So we think PCDM looks really interesting. Yeah. So I've got a lot of questions about just some of the mechanics about how Fedora might work.
Okay.
And we're really interested in things like if you were using, we'd probably look at one of the Hydra heads for things that, for video materials or where it's the right kind of object. We're interested in interoperability with Hydra and Fedora as well, whether you can kind of have things sharing the same Fedora or not, or whether you treat that as just as a silo. And
No, that's the goal of PCM. And like both of our communities talking to each other about how we implement PCM. Because if we interpret PCM differently, the goal of interoperability is gone.
So I wanted, maybe I'm not sure when the right time is for this, but I wanted to sort of discuss if they're talking about sort of PCDM interface on top of the Fedora that an application might talk to that would validate structures or pragmatically, I'm kind of thinking we probably just let these things all exist terms and not.
No, at LDCX, we talked a little bit about like a PCM, TCK, like being able to test it, like have a set of like objects, like a book or video or whatever, and then just being able to test your application against it, making sure it's like the same.
So I guess that just highlights one of the issues we have with people talking about books, works, all these kinds of relationships. They're mostly relevant to things like microscope data and so on, which is what I'm kind of trying to deal with at the moment, where you've got like very, very diverse stuff, which is tied together by code more than hierarchical relationships.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a lot of where PCDM came from. That there were some people who had a very simple applications where they expected people to come and upload paper or single file, and you had other people at the other end who were trying to model research data and relations between bibliographic works that had huge hierarchical structures, and trying to get those things to talk to each other wasn't working. So it's like you need to start down at a basic data model, get the simplest model we can. And so a lot of work is coming out of that to support, but I think we'll be much better at supporting more complex use cases like research data.
Yeah, don't you have a workshop this afternoon?
In this room.
I have a workshop. Yeah, if you just stay in this room, I'll have a PCM.
It's kind of full, but can people sneak in?
Yeah,
Should be registered.
It's fine.
Well, it was capped. I know.
It was capped.
Yeah, it was capped.
I don't think we kick anyone out. If there were
45 people, but if you sneak in here, it's just a matter of.
Yeah, just stay in here.
Just stay in
I won't take anyone to spot on once again.
About how many people fit in this room? Because we know it was the workshop that like went the quickest.
It's important.
So just we're also looking at Omeka, although for the reverse situation where we store everything in Fedora and then use Omeka for presentations and people that sort of broadcast out, especially when we're working with non-university parties. We work with several institutes in Latin America, and so we stored their stuff with their metadata on our servers, and then they could build presentations or displays using that and pull it from us.
Yeah, that's how we implement it too. Or like if you want, like we do not customize our IO implementation. It is generic. That's it. It's a presentation repository. If you want something really pretty, there's Omeka, here are the PIDs, go do whatever you want.
But one thing that we discovered we're going to have to do is that a lot of our collections are both Spanish English, and Dublin Core doesn't really support multiple languages, so we're actually going to probably produce both English and Spanish Dublin Core data stream, so that people who need the Spanish metadata can Omeka point at the Spanish Dublin Core data stream.
Yeah.
Dublin Core is another one.
It seems like obviously in Fedora 4 in the world of
Right.
data, that's all very
Yeah,
different.
then we can just spit whatever, but in Fedora 3, that's how we're probably going to handle it.
Diego?
Hi, I'm Diego. Well, basically,
Break it down.
I'm a developer. I work right now at Metro, Metropolitan New York Library Council. but I also have a piece of me working still in Chile, where I do different stuff. We have on one side in Chile 6 different Fedora repositories working with biodiversity data. We have a different approach on building a network based on that. It's not a Fedora cluster, it's a Solar cluster that has individual and different Fedora repositories joined together with that. It's Alendora front end, but very highly customized. Basically, we put a semantic layer over Alendora. So we manage custom ontologies using Alendora, and we store ontologies inside objects and data streams. Different content models to these ontologies. This allows us to mimic what Fedora 4 basically can do, but in a more limited way. We use O1 light ontologies basically, a very restricted, closed world vision of that. But it works pretty well in terms of being able to describe Darwin core data, because we manage our biodiversity information in Chile and share that to GPs using that. So we have like a way of harvesting that and being random place to GPs. And that's one piece of the work. On my New York Library Council work, we use Fedora 3. We have 3 different repositories, 1 public and 2 different for developing. Those are mainly manuscripts, books, postcards, nothing related to New York. And on both sides, we're thinking about moving to Fedora 4, basically because we're already trying to mimic the RDF world of Fedora 3, and we need RDF to describe complex ontologies we have. And on the Metropolitan New York Library Council side, I have a yes to move to Fedora 4 in a year. Basically, have a working Fedora 4 version of Fedora repositories for next July, next year, not this one. That depends basically on how much effort I put into Alendora also.
That will be an Alendora Fedora 4?
Yeah. Everything will be Alendora. Unlike people at iDrone, that basically we don't have many developers and having everything on PHP, and we know how to do that.
Yeah.
We can customize it. Works very well for us.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks, Diego. That's Mike.
Oh, hi, I'm Mike Durbin, I work at the University of Virginia. We've used Fedora since, I guess, the beginning. The repositories we have now, we have several Fedora 3 repositories, at least 1 in production, mostly Fedora 4 repository. 1 that's going to go live this summer using Hydra on top of it, using a pretty well customized Sophia instance. What else? That's probably it.
Yeah, maybe I'll just note that this line of gentlemen here, Mike, Diego, Nick, and Esme, are all we've run Fedora camps, sort of like a 3-day Fedora training. Done it twice. We have one coming up in at Columbia University in New York. But these 4 guys have all been trainers in the Fedora camp. If later on you have specific questions, I mean, there's a lot of institutional knowledge here. But oh, Nick, you have it. It was all a dream.
Yes.
Yeah, I showed my cards. But yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, a quick question. Is that a Sophia 6 that's going to be going into production, or Sophia 7?
The one that uses Fedora 4.
Well, 6 and 7
leading edge,
both.
whatever it is, it's leading edge. But like
Sophia 7 is not released yet, so that's as leading edge as it gets.
probably that. I don't know. We're going to be dependent on getting WebAC working. So I fix everything in Fedora. We just need to fix everything in Hydra to make WebAC work.
I heard that that's fixed, but not tested yet. So,
I'm actually ready to test it because I stay away from the Hydra development. They tell me it's the latest version because had trouble in the past, so they mind.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, my name is Rama Kamri from the University of Vienna, Austria. And we developed an application based on Fedora. We call it Fedora. Not Hydra, it's Fedora. And this is now about 7 or 8 years old, this project. I took over this project 5 years ago. We had run actually the version 3 because we are dealing with a lot of legacy code, and the application was built very fast, and so there's a lot of code very deep inside Fedora, and so we have to get rid of everything, and we're now doing re-engineering since 5 years, and it's just a lot of work because this is also not the project we are running at our university. We serve other universities also with this project in Austria and in 4 other countries, in Italy and the Western Balkans, Serbia, Bosnia, and Montenegro. And yes, I'm from the computer center. But we are working close with the group at the library, and we are not only in repository management, repository development, we are also very much focusing on the whole range of what's happened now with research data. So starting with data management plan up to what's about reuse and serving the researchers, and also the time is very limited. And yes, we are now thinking about updating to version 4, but it's actually not on the roadmap. Because
You're just thinking about it.
Sorry?
You're just thinking about it.
We're thinking about it, yes.
Yeah.
So that's also why I'm here, to have a little bit more, because we are at the moment not very inside what's in version 4, what's the main difference, and what's the main improvements, and so I want to get a little bit more known. My main developer, who is more on the architectural purpose, he wasn't able to come here, but I hope when after the summer he have time to drive a little bit more into version 4.
Yeah, so please sort of reach out, and I think whatever we can do to, it sounds like it will be a significant transition. I mean, maybe not too unlike what Jeff was describing, where you have dependencies that are kind of like all throughout, and so. And in terms of understanding what's in Fedora 4, like how it works, the details, I think we try to do the best that we can with the documentation. But if you're sort of coming at it trying to understand, I imagine there's some gaps in there and ambiguities and whatever else. So please reach out and help as much as we can.
Then a question I would we are our application at Fedora is developed in Perl. Is there any Perl development? No. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, then it probably will stay that way, Perl. Or are you just getting a sense of like the Fedora community and how early they are?
I think at the moment we don't think about changing this because our university, our developers, we have a lot of Perl developers at our university, but the question is to find new Perl developers is very hard.
That's the next generation of Perl developers.
At the moment, we don't want to change it, but maybe it will come up this topic in the future.
It's a good topic. All right. Yeah, thanks, Colin.
Hi, my name is Lutz. I work in the National Library here of Ireland. I'm a developer. In the NLI, we use Hydra internally since I think probably a year and a half ago. And that version of Hydra that was initially developed, it was using Fedora 3, but since we've upgraded to Fedora 4, and we've done some more work with it, deployed it, it's ready to go. We're kind of waiting on hardware mainly because we need pretty much double the storage. We won't have to do the running simultaneously before we actually switch off the Hydra that's running Fedora 3. So yeah.
And what has that migration looked like? How have you done it?
We took so we had our app, which our Hydra app, and we basically upgraded the gems to the newest version. So we're as close to the edge as we could get, and then we said, well, it's broken, and we tried to fix everything up. Just running it locally with the local Fedora, for instance, and there was a good amount of stuff that didn't work straight away, but I think we spent probably around 4 months. We only have 2 developers at the moment as well. And we work on some other things in between as well. But we spent about 4 months getting from saying, let's switch on, let's upgrade. And we are at a place now where we're ready. It's just like I said, we don't have to source just yet.
So you're waiting on hardware before you do data migration?
Sorry?
So you're waiting on new storage
Yes,
before you can do data migration?
Yeah, we've got, well, because of the fact that a lot of the main amount of data that's in the repository is the image data. We digitize a big chunk of the content in the NLI, and that is actually stored on disk on a separate server, right? As well as in the repository. So it's kind of stored in 2 places. Because it was only ever used internally, there isn't really a big onus on us to maintain the exact IDs or anything like that in terms of what the Hydra actually exposes at the moment. So we are probably not even going to take the stuff out of Fedora 3. We're going to check that everything on the disk is the same. We've got our checksums and all that. And then we're going to re-ingest into Fedora 4 from disk as opposed to migrating all data from Fedora 3 into Fedora 4. It just seems easier.
Thanks. All right, wrapping it up with Aaron.
Hi. Yes, I'm Aaron Berkland. I've been involved with Fedora probably about 10 years ago when I first met Fedora at Fedora University. I think I was the Fedora 2, Fedora 2 at the time, the National Science Digital Library. But currently I'm with Johns Hopkins University. I started with them late last year. And so they have some Fedora 3 in production, which I really don't know all that much about, and are making movements towards moving to Sophia as well. The unit I'm involved with, we have a semi in production instance of Fedora 4 in collaboration with the National Snow and Ice Data Center, and as part of the ELOCA project. And they store materials related to interviews with various people who are affected by climate change, etc. But basically, they have a small instance, which I would say is in the pilot stage right now. so we currently our group is collaborating with the Center for Open Science and are basically collaborating on some tools which would allow researchers at the university to interact with the open science framework, and we have some tools which would then be able to export data from these Center for Open Science into our curation tools, and basically it'll be part of workflows in our data management group. So I'm involved with that right there, as well as the API extension architecture, which we've been I'll have a talk Wednesday. We've been a few members of the Fedora community have been some common interest in exposing functionality associated with the repository that doesn't necessarily belong in core Fedora. So talking about that architecture later on in the conference.
Yeah, I imagine, especially folks coming from Fedora 3, and there are a few of them here, might be interested in hearing more about the API export as the morning proceeds, even in advance of your presentation. I think obviously a lot of work has gone into designing out and some proof of concepts around the APIX, and it might be worth getting some common understanding of what is there, kind of what thinking has gone on, and then some folks might bring some perspective to it as well. Yeah. Unless you don't want to.
No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. That's helpful. You're pointing at something.
We'll do one more introduction.
Is Aaron here?
Yep.
Aaron, are you here? Should we be able to hear? Is he on mute? Is he talking?
Is here. Says the audio is working
He types that?
well. IRC.
Yeah. Does he have a microphone? Can you share your voice, Aaron? Is that? I think that should be possible if you don't have mute on. I mean, is this live or is there like a 5-minute delay?
I think patches through the sensors first so they can bleep out.
It's a maple syrup, man. It's a little slow.
He says I don't think I can broadcast on that.
All right. Well, so that's a short introduction. All right. So looking at the agenda here, item number 2, actually, I believe is a carryover from maybe last year's agenda. There was some discussion around binaries, sort of data streams in Fedora, and whenever you create in Fedora 4 a binary resource, I mean, basically you have 2 types of resources. You have objects and data streams, right? Whenever you create a binary or data stream in Fedora 4, another resource automatically gets created, which is an RDF resource, which describes that binary. And that's what we're talking about here. Non-RDF sources, which is the binary, and then the RDF source, which is the description. And there are some complexities there in terms of the actual triples that are in the description and basically other interactions, as you can imagine. You have sort of 2 resources that are kind of effectively describing or related to the binary. Sort of, how do you address different scenarios? So I'm inclined to sort of, I mean, unless there's anything in particular that people want to talk about with relation to this. I mean, it seems like it's kind of in the details and a little bit in the weeds of Fedora 4, and kind of given where most people are relative to Fedora 4, I'm not sure if that particular agenda item makes sense. And yeah, I think that some of the folks who are keenly, or were a year ago, keenly interested in that maybe aren't here even today. So I'm inclined to punt on that for the time being. Then the number 3, number 4, personally, I feel like those are the big items for this year, 2016. The API specification in particular, it's been, I think, a long time coming, sort of clearly specifying the contract of services that Fedora provides. So that's what that effort is. Ideally, what we would be able to do, and hopefully we will have time to actually do it, is go through the elements of the API specification. Basically, there are 6 pieces to it. There's basic CRUD operations, and the CRUD operations are aligned with the linked data platform specification. There is authorization, which is aligned with the WebAC work that came out of the W3C. There's versioning, which is aligned, or the specification and the implementation will be aligned with Memento. There is what we were calling transactions. I think we're trying to more accurately, but less pleasantly, call batch atomic operations. Which it's not real clear that there is a standard, a RESTful standard that we can align with there. Then there is fixity checking, so fixity on ingest as well as fixity on demand. So those are the 5 main RESTful services. Actually, not the 5 main; those are the 5 RESTful services, and the contract that Fedora is guaranteeing. And then there's a 6th thing, which is sort of on its own in the sense that it's not a RESTful service, but it is a part of the contract of Fedora 4, which is messaging, and sort of the details of the messages, what those messages look like, and under what circumstances can you expect a message to be emitted. Basically, those 6 things are linked off of on the internet. For those of you who have the internet, those 6 things are linked off there, and basically, what would be helpful for us to do is get 1, common understanding, and then 2, some input on the drafts that currently exist. Each of those specifications are in different phases or stages of draftiness, and what we need to do really as soon as possible, so I'd like it to be in this calendar year at least, is basically having a formalized draft of each of them, like actually something that's implementable, actually something that you can write clients against, something that you could write an implementation against, and we could actually test it. That like Fedora is doing what it says it, or this Fedora implementation is doing what the specification says. So I mean that's very important for a number of reasons, client side, server side, and just sort of establishing where your dependencies are. And so I think speaking to some of the cases of where where you have Fedora 3, it's like boom, you have Fedora 3 installation, and then it's just like you're maybe all over it, like building dependencies all over the place. This is an attempt at making a very clear line of abstraction of these are the services that you should build your dependencies on. You can depend on that contract. If you want to sort of like go underneath and around and then like danger zone. But go ahead and like this is the contract. So this is very important, and it seems like this is the right room of stakeholders to sort of talk through the details of like at the highest level, like are these the services that meet your needs, and then digging down, like are these the aspects of each of those services that is that appropriate, or like what does this mean, or whatever. So that's the number 3. Number 4, so this is really top of mind for Fedora 4, but I think it's interesting. There's so Mike at UVA, you guys are in production with Fedora. Sounds like National Library of Ireland, you're sort of like almost there. I mean, basically like almost in production. And I mean, Aaron, you guys have some work going on with Fedora 4. Esme, you guys are on the cusp of production. This agenda item is sort of starting to even talk about how as Fedora 4 itself is changing, how do we sort of keep continuity? So it's super important, but like if people aren't currently on Fedora 4, then sort of continuity between sort of incremental points within Fedora 4 itself is maybe less interesting, although important. But it's not clear to me that this is exactly the audience, although I would like it to be. Peter?
So the developer I'm working with really wanted me to find out whether the API was going to be stable and whether he could trust it. So it's a good way to talk about progress and too, so he was concerned, very concerned.
Yeah.
About putting it into development now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly the API specification stuff, like that's what it's all about. Yeah. So I think if this, I know Australia is in a different time zone than where like a lot of this activity it happens. So it's it's challenging to participate in some of the standing meetings. But I guess it would be valuable to have this person engage in the conversations and in touch. And so if that person is interested in doing that, I think we, speaking for myself, would like to sort of coordinate around that to the degree that we can. And then AJS6F put number 5 on here. And so if he shows up, we can talk about that. And then I think number 6 is maybe just sort of open forum. I know, Peter, you had some questions that you wanted to raise, and maybe there's sort of, Matthias, you probably do as well. And others. And so I think just sort of talking about details of whatever is most pressing for individuals. So like this is a good group of folks to be bouncing around ideas with. For me, so in terms of crafting this agenda, number 3, number 4, I feel like are very important, in the sense that I put those on there. 2, 5, 2 and 5, were put on, 2 is from last year and put on by effectively someone else, 5 by someone else who's not here, and then 6 is sort of just talking about whatever is of importance to folks. So in addition to those few things, are there other agenda items that maybe folks feel like, this is a great opportunity, like we need to talk about this also?
I wonder how much that would be related to number 4, but I'd be interested to better understand what's going on with projection / federation.
We talked about projection federation.
I know projection would come up for us because we have sound collections of 11 million images, and it's just much easier to ingest if I can project onto where they're stored right now rather than run through ingestion.
We have time to talk about the status of the performance testing that has been going on.
And Esme has been very involved. Nick has been very involved. I think that's in terms of like, basically, sort of speaking to that just briefly, every month for the last, I don't know, 6 months or so, we've had this performance and scalability working group that we sort of meet as we do virtually once a month, and we sort of detailed out a set of tests that are trying to just get a baseline, a performance baseline, and then from that, once that baseline is established, then you sort of move that testing in whatever direction makes sense, kind of understanding the performance characteristics of Fedora as it stands right now, and where, based on that baseline testing, the weaknesses seem to be, and sort of pushing in those directions. So if you are interested in performance and scalability, that's the reason this working group exists, is for you to join. So we can talk about performance testing that has happened, projection, federation. Any other things that you'd like to chat about? Okay. Okay. So is there, like, we can, it's 10:15, I think it's, we have an hour right now till 11:15. I mean, maybe someone who has the schedule in front of them.
11.
So
11, so we have,
15-minute break and then another hour.
so, okay.
Hour and a half before dinner.
So we have 45 minutes right now, until 11, and then we come back at what time?
11:15.
And then 11:15 till what, 12:30?
12:30.
So an hour and 15 minutes. All right. Okay, so I think it's most important to talk about things that people will be engaged in and are interested in. I would put on the table 3 and 4 and 6, and then it was definitely projection federation and performance. Put a call out, like what do people want to talk about here for the next 45 minutes?
API specification sounds great.
Okay, awesome. Let's see here. I will note, let's see. So this is the versioning. What you point at things sometimes, Nick, and I should have done that.
Jared Wicklows from Manitoba, not
That's what that figure was supposed to mean. I'm supposed to like know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
They're very condensed messaging in Canada.
Yeah. He's from Manitoba.
Yep.
Sounds like a pull request. So so this is the initial draft of the versioning, and I just put this up here as an example. So there's a spectrum of draftiness for these specifications, and the versioning is sort of more towards like something that we can actually sort of concretely talk about. So the other documents are Google Docs still. This is the versioning document is in GitHub. I won't talk in, so we have like 3 different GitHub organizations. The main core, then we have labs, which is just sort of experimental stuff, and then in between we have extensions, Fedora, EXT, for things that are community supported and can be used in production but not core. So, this is in GitHub and then published. The URL here you can see at the top is sort of version URL, but it's actually just a redirect. If you take out that date information, Fedora info /spec/ resource versioning, then it will redirect you to the latest version. But I just pulled this one up to highlight, what we would like is for all of them to be sort of published in this sense, and sort of concrete specification. So I put this up here as sort of for the other ones. So maybe let's go through this one. I think I can. Is it safe to assume that people, don't have this in front of you because of internet issues? And can you read this? More or less. All right. I'm just trying to think of what, and I'm interested in input here. What is the most effective way for us to achieve the goals of common understanding around each of these pieces of the specification and sort of gathering input and feedback on it?
One of the key questions here that I've heard discussed and maybe gone around a few times is how versions are created, and whether that's explicitly specified or whether that's left to the implementations, whether it's implicit or explicit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a summary of where that's round up would be a good place to start.
Okay, yeah, and that's in here. So maybe in advance of that, let me just sort of give some background with that particular question. So in the world of Fedora 3, every time you make a change or do something, a version is created in the audit data stream. Like you sort of capture that. In Fedora 4, it's different. In Fedora 4, I think it's really maybe more effective to think about versions as snapshots, a snapshot in time. And and those snapshots are created on demand. So there's an API request that you make that says, I want a version now. And it takes a snapshot of the state of the resource or the hierarchy of resources then. So that's sort of a big difference between Fedora 3 and Fedora 4. A version sort of being captured all the time versus only when you say, I want to create a version now. So some background there.
Can I intervene for a second?
Yep.
We do have a use case and we didn't attend, we didn't wait for Fedora 4. We have implemented the version of Memento quite successfully, though I don't know if it is already running or not. I was not in the design, so I have limited information about it. But the idea is you can ask the repository which laws about a specific subject, about a specific thing, were enforced at a certain time. And that is the use of the Memento. So you get the laws that were enforced at a specific time. So you will always get the latest if you don't ask for that.
So basically what you're saying is that you have a use case around versioning with Memento. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's good to hear.
So the snapshot, is that a snapshot of single resources? Is that a snapshot of the whole repository, so whole graph, or is that something in between that I can define somehow?
It's whatever resource you make the version request on.
Okay.
And
including the resource if you wanted to.
What's that?
It works, includes the rest of the tree, right?
So there are two different things here. There's the implementation, there's the specification. So the implementation definitely, you say on this resource, I want to create a version and it creates a snapshot of that resource and of the tree below it. If we want to support that in the specification, that's a different question. Because that might be hard. Some of the functionality that, and I think this is the challenge with the specification. We don't want the specification to just be a description of what the current implementation does. We want it to be something more general that can be supported with different implementations over time. Mike?
Does the specification speak to the containment and our path? So our current implementation, if something is contained, the resource is contained by another one, the path is it has the same prefix.
Yeah.
Is that part of our spec, or is that something that other implementations are going to potentially abandon?
You're talking about maybe that'd be in relation to just like CRUD operations?
Yeah.
It is not, I don't think it's called out in the spec that containment is related to the path of a resource.
All right. Because that may be relevant with regards to whether we want to have the spec. It may be expected that if the paths include the contained resources that versioning would.
So before we get, thanks Aaron, before we get too far, I mean, I should have established this earlier, but notes, is anyone taking notes or has anyone been jotting down some notes that you would feel comfortable being the official note taker, like we do for all of our meetings?
Can we just use the Google YouTube video as the notes of the meeting?
So it's like a 4-hour note reading session?
No reading, no listening.
Yeah.
Let's say just put on 8 times speed and then you can listen to it in half an hour.
And Mike can transcribe out of it.
Yeah, I guess we could run it through some transcription service.
I'd be happy to take notes if we're okay with them starting from now.
Yeah, well, then we'll do the Andy Wagner approach for it that came before, I guess. But you had something to say, Aaron.
Yeah, so I actually, don't remember when this was, but I actually posted a question to the tech list asking pretty much the same thing. And I don't think that got a number of responses, but I think one response that it got was basically it implied that if you have Memento, then you could very well have the representation of resources in a version. The URIs are not URIs to a Memento, so that you basically follow the link to that resource, then look at the headers, see that it's a version, get the Memento version, etc. So I think what he's comparing to is that in the current Fedora implementation, if you look at the representation of a resource from within a version, the links are essentially to the Mementoized versions. Which I think the implication in that email thread was that potentially the implementation wouldn't necessarily have to do that, and a client crawling through a hierarchy would visit the Memento headers in order to get the link to the particular version they're interested in. So it's I wasn't exactly for someone implementing this, you kind of want to know which approach you would take.
So fundamentally, did you ever did yours?
Just a second.
Fundamentally, if you make a request on a resource, a version of a resource, and basically served up via the Memento protocol, and you're saying then the links that come out of that version of the resource, you're pointing, like, what are you pointing at? Those links being Mementoized, or resources to other version resources of that same date timestamp, or
right. So if you have a resource which has a link to resource ABC, right?
Mm-hmm.
And currently, when you take a version, that link you make a version, then you get a representation of the resource that is within that snapshot. Your link is not to ABC, it's to ABC v1. And if you follow a link to ABC v1 and it links to DEF, the link will be DEF v1. So it points to the representation of resources within that snapshot. Okay. Whereas I think the implication of not doing that is you take a snapshot of the resource and then the link still points to ABC.
Yeah.
You follow a link to ABC, see the Memento headers, and then can notice that there is an ABC v1.
Yeah.
That if you're interested in following the state of the resource in that snapshot, you'd go to the headers, find ABC v1, et cetera. So it'd be different workflows depending upon how it's how it's implemented, basically.
yeah, and first off, I'm not sure why I'm not recalling this particular email thread.
Because it only had like 1 or 2 responses. It was not memorable. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of esoteric at the time. So.
Yeah. So I don't think it's called out here, in which I think you're raising a point around. Maybe it's worth calling out here. But I'm trying to think through of mechanics of linking. Mike Durbin. There's a lot of seats, and it just seems like you're in the one seat where I keep having your head behind Diego's head. Hey, Tom. Yeah. Guys and kids.
Yes.
I'm wondering, Aaron, about the mechanics of those links. So you make a request on a version resource, the links coming out of that being also sort of mementoized links, and like those presumably being like translated or something on the fly. It wouldn't be captured in. Yeah, I'm just like thinking through the mechanics of it, and is that reasonable?
I certainly don't know. I mean, I think it's an artifact of how it's implemented now. I mean, because I don't know a lot of much about the mode shape mechanics, but from what I understand with versioning, it's what they do. What happens now is, I think it's trivial. At least that's the impression. That's one of the computers who knows more comment on that, but that's what I would think. From looking at it from the outside, it's just kind of a natural consequence of how versions are implemented in JCR.
I'm relatively sure that the version resources, when you've got a whole tree, are linking to the version children. And you would need to do some work to loop over those and figure out what their non-versioned URL was in order to link to them. And it would be a different resource. You could do that. I think I can see, I haven't thought about this a lot, but I could definitely see times where you would want to see the tree as its own thing with everything versioned. But I can imagine other cases where you want to go to the current version of the resource and separately discover its versions. I think it depends on whether you're regarding it as a separate resource or whether you're regarding it as a part of a complex resource might influence which one you'd rather have.
Yeah. Mike, you were about to say something a moment ago. No.
No, I don't think so.
All right. Yeah, and so maybe from a specification point of view, do people have an opinion on what would make sense to see, or is it rather that we just make it clear what it is that you will see and specify that? Yeah. So the question is, do you want to influence the specification, or do you want to just sort of capture the state?
Well, I'm kind of interested in when you're looking at a resource that is a version of some other resource, is there a link header or something that tells you this is a version of some other resource? I know if you're at a resource that there's a specification for discovering the time gate and going and finding the resource.
Yeah,
Version.
there's
A reciprocal.
there's a resource or a version of this resource.
That, to me, the most important thing is that a client understands in a standard way whether it's dealing with the base resource or a version.
Yeah.
And if you can go back and forth, if you could, as a client, say which one you wanted, seems ideal, but just at a base note, being able to know and navigate back and forth between those seems like the essential part.
Yeah, I think that is the essential part. But it is speaking to implementation. So if you're a client consuming a resource that is versioned, I guess my question is, to what extent does your client have to be aware of Memento in order to kind of do the right thing? I mean, if you just point at a client that knows LDP and nothing else at a URI of a Memento X version, does it need to know Memento in order to navigate appropriately, or not? The way it is currently, the answer is no, because it could just follow links and it's not aware of.
Well, some links. If you have a link to another object using your own arbitrary predicate, that's going to be a link to a current version of it. Right. So if you say, this is my access control policy, it's gonna.
Does it matter if that resource is in the version hierarchy or
It
not?
does actually matter. But if it's outside of the version hierarchy, then those links, you can't just follow those.
Which they happen using any type of process. You will go right in the tree and it can be anywhere.
So that may be an argument for you can't really make it easy, and perhaps every link should be exactly how it would look if it were restored to the current version, and they'd have to follow momentum links.
That would be an argument.
I think it'd be
that would be a consistent approach, so that no matter what you're looking to, you're linking to the current version. If you want to know about Memento resource and discover what was there and find the corresponding version of that happened at the same time.
And there may not be one.
Right.
if we expose the ability to delete the versions, you can have deleted the version of a child, of a contained resource. So therefore, you wouldn't even be able to have a version linked to it.
I think that would, yes, that would make sense, and it would be consistent and reasonable to us as far as.
I understand the two of the other one, if we could make it work, that would be lovely, but I don't think we can, given the arbitrary links.
Yeah, and I think, JCR, the JCR implementation happens to give us links to the version resources. And in a certain scenario that's very convenient and it would be more cumbersome to have to go and discover for each one. But I think that that's a big burden to ask to put in the specification and require every versioning implementation to support.
We also have to do funny business to make those containers look right, because they have different paths.
Yeah.
So I think it's already not fully implemented in an elegant way.
Right, there might be places where it breaks down already.
Yeah, so having spec would be good.
So if Fedora were to implement it according to the spec, would it basically kind of undo the approach that it's doing now, and not, would that kind of be the implication then?
Yeah, certainly that would be the implication.
Okay.
And right now, there's RDF production machinery that goes through the children and the properties and it's generating those links, and it's generating those links by, looking at the version information and updated to figure out where the base resource was and into that instead. I don't think it's necessarily going to be much more complicated to do that. Might not be any more complicated.
It's probably not going to be more complicated. A lot of the things are just the implementation. I was like, hey, let's see what came back, and if they were complaining about it, those triples are there, even though I think we got rid of the JSON frozen stuff. But
Yes.
We can probably still use the versioning, the JCR versioning to implement this, which means it won't have to be a migration. Probably won't have to be a migration to make this work.
It sort of speaking. Yeah,
I have a question as well. Memento is basically a standard for exposing the versions.
That's right.
That doesn't affect how we are dealing with versions inside. It's through JCR or whatever we have to. So these specs are dealing with exposure and how versions are being built inside?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was Esme's question also at the beginning.
I think it's the next section. It's 5.
And what happens with the JCR change?
What happens if the JCR changes?
Well, then the implementation would have to change to meet the spec, or we'd have to reconsider everything.
JCR is a more stable spec than Fedora spec.
So like if we were not all shape.
I mean, that's the point. Establishing the specification, the Fedora specification, those are the guarantees that we operated, and it's for exactly that reason. It's like, what if the JCR changes? Something that we don't have control over, we don't want to then inflict on Fedora users. That seems unstable, and sort of that's what this specification is mitigating against. So maybe Diego and Esme, in terms of creating versions, so there are different approaches for doing that. And so what the specification is detailing is a pattern for how does the server communicate what approach is available to the user for creating versions, versus saying, it's not specifying like this is how you create versions, but rather this is how you determine the approach for creating versions.
I noticed that there are 3 people's names against those, and none of those 3 people are present. I was hoping 2 of them would be.
There are names there.
Or names.
Yeah, and actually all 3 of them were initially supposed to be here.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Ben was kind of late.
Yeah.
Because he had a plane today, and all that.
Yeah, no, and Ben was the one that I was expecting to be late, and we expected Adam, and I also expected Rob.
Did Tom have you seen Adam? Like, is he injured? Is he did he find a gutter?
Not by me.
Yeah.
I saw him yesterday.
Well, that's about Adam, not Rob.
Also, I've also heard Rob is around.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Rob as well. That can be confirmed. Adam, it's up in the air. Yeah. So basically these are three different possible approaches for how you might create versions, and the mechanics of specifying which of these three a particular server implementation offers. I don't think it's detailed. But in any case.
So 7.2.1 is the most similar to Fedora 3, and I don't remember if there's still an implementation in Fedora 4, but at least at one point that was a possibility to configure. You could tell a resource to do that in Fedora 4.
Yeah.
Is that still there?
I mean, that's like purely at the mode shape level, like it's a configuration that you make in your CND file.
Oh.
And so that's not something we would add. Like we don't want to tell people to do that, right? Like any sort of mode shape CND configurations. That's
I thought that there was the ability somewhat recently to set a versioning policy on a resource. And one of the versioning policies was automatically create versions, and that afterwards that resource would just make versions.
setting a versioning policy.
We had that. It's been it was coming out about a year after.
Oh, sorry, out of date.
Yeah, I guess recent is relative.
I haven't paid a lot of attention to versioning, so.
Yeah.
Sorry. But that's hypothetically a thing that can be implemented in GCR. Or hypothetically, a thing that Fedora could implement and happen.
Yeah.
So 7.2.2 is the default functionality in Fedora 4 right now.
Yep. Yep.
And 7.2.3
is basically where you like push a version, like say this is a version.
This is what version 1 is.
Yeah.
And also that would be the least challenging to implement. You would just, it's not implemented now, but it could be easily implemented, it seems like.
So you push a version whatever you want to put that for one resource.
Yeah.
It's just you don't have the ability to put something in Fedora that is like a whole graph.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not good.
That's no problem.
No.
Right, you can't do the whole graph because it's hey.
I was just asking if you were dead.
Very close.
It's the music stuff.
It's really cool.
Is that typically does that happen when you walk into a room?
I'm starting like this.
Yeah. So your name or your letters have come up a couple times today. So just I know some people haven't met you at, and we did introductions.
Oh,
You want-
I'm Mr. Rucker from the University of Virginia. Commuter, a long time. Too long. Need more?
Yeah, so we are just kind of starting to go through some of the elements of the specification. We were talking about versioning, and mostly just getting a sense of sort of people's understanding of versioning, a couple details there. I guess my general question is, are like on the importance scale, like how much do you rely on versioning, or is that a feature that is more or less important? From?
I think at the moment, at the state we are now, and there's a huge bunch of data, new data coming in. That's not that relevant, but I think it will become relevant in 3 to 5 years when the people are then looking for their own versions. So we have to be prepared of this question will come from our state. But at the moment, that's not that relevant. But I know we have to be prepared.
So you would need versions, just that you first need versions in order to
Yes,
need
because when you don't care about the versions, and then the people ask for them, you cannot serve them.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Diego? Yeah.
We need them. They're lacking. Basically, our search workflow, everything we are doing right now in biodiversity stuff, is incremental. So they're refining their division of biodiversity each day. That means we're keeping track of every change this way, and we need easy access to going back. For example, if someone says this butterfly is from that species, and then we have like an expert that's in Sonia that says it's not that, yes, we do the whole workflow, and we need to keep track because basically on our side, errors are more important than success. About errors made, we can learn without that. So having a way of accessing the original resources in a simple way in terms of path is very important.
Yeah, Peter?
I think it's possibly, there might be other ways of implementing those kinds of things and thinking about versioning. So, if you publish, some way my impulse was to say it doesn't matter things like research data or even publications, right? Because a publication is a publication and it's kind of immutable as the thing that you publish. And if you make a new one, it's a new thing. So the versioning could be in the application logic about, in the domain that you're in, handling that with relations and so on. So, this one, like the crazy stuff we do with PC and ordering, building stupid chains of RDF that no one will ever be able to implement. You could build your versioning like that and leave it as a separate concern.
So
this is a very uninformed perspective, right?
But your point being that maybe versioning could be handled at the application level?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's really going to be a great thing to build into the stack. It sounds like there are a lot of dependency issues and what's underneath other standards and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be dubious idea. And thinking about some of our current use cases where we're looking at scientists writing code, right? We would get them to go and do their versioning in Git, and then archive the whole repository. So they would push the state of the Git repository.
Yeah, and I think different applications are going to have different notions about versioning, exactly for some of the reasons you're talking about. That if you replace something, many people will want that to be an entirely separate resource, completely decoupled and independent. But I think there are a lot of applications where people are iteratively editing metadata, and you consider it the same resource, but you might want to go back and see previous drafts. And so I think this kind of versioning is really useful for that. But I agree, if you've got a publication or a data set and you have a new version of that data set, that's probably a different resource. And people think of it as different resources and give them separate identifiers and all of that.
Yeah, so different types of versioning for different aspects of what you're having in the repository.
Right. I think it's a bit like the transaction discussion, where There's actually several different kind of related overlapping things that people use the same words for sometimes, but there's actually sort of a spectrum of different things going on. And some people will lump them all together, and some people will split them out. Some people won't care about them at all.
And I can tell you the current state of versioning is really relevant to a couple of our things where.
The current state being Fedora.
Where
What's
it's the same object, it's just different versions rather than creating new objects. I can think of several cases where we have primaries, we have graduate students or undergrads even doing a lot of editing, and they want to say, oh, okay, graduate student X made some major errors yesterday, I need to go back to the previous version of that same thing. And they would not be interested in creating a totally separate version.
Does it make sense to apply also versioning not only to the objects that you are ingesting, but also to the ontology or the vocabularies you are validating your data against?
Are those repository resources or?
Yeah, they could be.
I have a presentation today about that. First.
Great.
Yeah, storing the ontologies, the whole ontologies aside, and LDP-based repositories specifically for Fedora.
Because we will be creating probably metadata, administrative metadata, saying this was validated against this version of the object.
Exactly.
That's the point.
Exactly, that's the point. Cool. And it's crazy. It's the second person that needs it.
Forward to your presentation.
That also speaks to the earlier conversation of having to use Memento to go find a version that matches that timestamp, because you can use that in the ontology to say, I need the ontology that matches this timestamp. So that seems, that earlier discussion really comes out.
Okay. So you kind of, I guess, specifically with versioning, the fact that it is founded on Memento, and then there's this pattern for determining for, on the server side, what flavor or what's the mechanism for creating new versions. Do people have specific demands or requirements on versioning, or is it more along the lines of in a specified way how to use it?
I would say the latter is sufficient for parties. Yeah, same for us.
One question really, I'm not sure if this is working fixed or still something ongoing. In terms of versioning, what happens when you remove the original resource in terms of binaries? Are versions kept? Like if I have like this huge image, I make a version of that. Then I remove the original. Since we're using mode shape and things like the big images are stored as physical images, does mode shape make a physical copy of the image in the version, or are they pointers to the same? And basically they need this to keep or to be consistent in terms of that. If I make a version of a binary, if I remove the original resource, I still want to have the binary there.
Yeah, so maybe just, that's a clear question. And so the clear answer is, so if you have a binary and you, let's say binaries inside of a container, so you have a/binary, and you actually create a version of A, and then you delete the binary, and then you want to revert version A, the binary is still there, or you get the binary back. And the way that's handled in the covers is with pointers. So it's not, and it's not the current mode shape implementation will not actually remove the binary.
That said, if you version at the binary level and you delete the binary, you delete all the versions.
Yeah. It's like you version the container that's holding the binary. Hi Dan, welcome.
What are you doing?
So, and so this is the first element of the spec versioning here that we've talked through. What we would like to see with all of them is a focused effort on getting them to a state, even beyond what we're seeing here, but getting them to a state where it's like I was mentioning before, implementable. It's complete as complete as we can get it for sort of like the first public publication. My question for this one, as well as for all of the aspects of the spec, is there anyone who would be interested in helping, sort of in a committed way, move? I'll ask the same question for each of them, but move versioning sort of from this first round to the second round. So all of the specs have gone through the first round. Getting to the kind of initial sort of getting ideas on paper, but there's another round, and so the question is there anyone who's either very interested in specs or very interested in versioning specifically, or just very interested in helping out? That would informally, you see what I'm asking?
The fixed spec is still on my schedule to keep working on. I have had other time constraints lately that have prevented that. But.
Yeah, it's like great time.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you can't answer the question.
Whatever you need me to do, Andrew, I will do.
You're a good man, Nick. Let's come back in 15 minutes. Let's actually go through the other 5 elements of the spec, and then before going on to anything else, we'll talk about Federation projection, as well as the performance updates. Is there coffee?
There's coffee in the building across the street, or across the road.
And was there I was gonna go try to get internet.
Yeah, it's nothing new.
Anyone's sitting around tonight, apparently it's working. Have you seen on your phone?
You log in, and then okay. So you're making, but I want to do. Yes. Someone saying here.
Well, I can't make any, I don't know what the situation is.
Sounds good. Are you gonna watch it?
But
I don't see words. I guess you can
Yes. Yeah, but already.
Maybe I'll take it. We'll take it to the.
Yeah, well, Pat had a replacement surgery. And she was most of the way through the recovery from that. She probably broke
a bone in her foot on the same way.
Oh,
So the physical therapy for a total hip is to walk away. The therapy for a broken bone is not to walk at all, or at least as little as possible. So she had contrary therapies on the same way. So she just finally got out of the boot, and after 6 months.
wow. So what stage is she at now? What's the recommendation?
Yeah.
What sort of therapy she undergoes?
She swims.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
So, and she has some other exercises she's able to get back to. So she's still wobbly a little bit. But, well on that. I thought I would be sympathetic about the broken, the break that you had the last time.
Yes.
Not only keep you from your break, I can walk that way. Believe it or not, you would have thought I would have been up at 5 a.m. I overslept.
Oh, really?
Yes. Couldn't sleep on the plane.
Yeah, I couldn't really sleep on a plane either. But I overslept just a little bit, so I got here shortly after 9.
So let me understand you are living.
Hello. Came back. There's nobody in here. Nobody in here.
I do have a question for you, maybe you can help me.
Yeah.
This is something very simple. Having some strange results to namespace prefixes in the latest version of Fedora 4.
Okay.
Basically, prior 4.5, I was getting the exact namespace I was given for my types. When I was also using TTL something. Now I'm getting an S01, 02, 03.
And I think it depends on the first time a namespace is used. If you are using a namespace-aware format and have it defined, then it uses that namespace. If not, it just mints in a 0, 1, whatever.
And even when I'm like putting your results for the first time and doing it correctly, just I know it's getting the correct namespace. Just it's no way.
But it's not using the prefix.
It's not using.
Which probably means that it was already defined.
Oh, blank. So from 0. I wiped my test repository from scratch. Even using the Yeti. I don't know why. It's crazy because I just my whole stack of TTLs for today's PCDM one.
Yeah.
I ordered the first version and I get PCDM installer. And now I
And now you don't. That's awful.
It's awful. I don't know what
There's
I saw you put a message there for user provided once and I commit. That's fine.
Yeah.
And it was any other changes. Well, I know it's
Yeah, I don't remember there being any changes, so I'm surprised that the behavior was
it's a thing, yeah.
I think it was Aaron Coburn who had a utility to go and look at the chain files.
but only for prefixes that are not bind to RDF types. Just learning deal differently.
Of course they are.
So you can change any other type of, but it makes no sense. Most of our plugins are using have types of more for AAA.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just already testing it. I'm rebuilding now the bug machine again just to be sure. Maybe my TTL has some defect that it's not being parsed correctly. But I suppose if I'm giving it, like I'm saying, this is PCDN, I'm giving the URL, the correct one of the namespace, and then I'm putting their PCDM object. It's understanding. It's basically making the match between the URL and the prefix.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it. Like I get the full triple.
The prefixes don't mean anything.
Yeah, don't mean anything, but it's getting parsed correctly. The thing is the real prefix being served. That's all.
Yeah.
Which is annoying for people when I try to teach them this.
Okay, they're not meaningful, but they sure are handy.
And yeah, on other side, most of the stuff we're doing right now is on JSON. We use prefix a lot for naming the JSON.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
The curation from service isn't building right now.
Of course it isn't.
Because it's getting a connection refused from GitHub. It was working 2 days ago, but it might be something with this one.
This could be. It's using HTTPS at least, not
No.
Git.
No,
it's
it's
using
using Git.
Why you? That's it for me. Pass.
It's getting a connection refused. This is using Git.
Yeah, I would.
Is there a way to specify?
Yeah, if you use, so that's in the workshop.
Yeah.
Right, so. I would have sworn I used HTTPS for that instead of Git.
Yeah, it says git clone and git do, but in the gem file, it just says, this is git.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, of course. The gem file is going to be using Git over SSH, not over HTTPS. We could rewrite the gem file to use the HTTPS version of that.
How hard is this?
I don't think that's. I'm pretty sure it's supported. I'm not sure if I know exactly what the syntax is, but let me see if I have that somewhere.
Oh, forget it. Just gonna call something for you. it's not all popular, right?
What is that?
Yeah, I got
That's the one. Well, I know you drink a lot of beer. I see you tripping around that, but I'm pretty sure you don't have access to Patagonian beer.
No, I definitely do not.
Okay, that's good. That's a Chilean beer made from Belgish descendants, but made with Patagonia for the glaciers.
Excellent.
And
Well, thank you so much.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Big one.
That's really That's a strange one. That's a beer made with same batch mixed with a small berry that name's Nike. It's native from there. It's like a blueberry that tastes different.
You want that one?
Yeah.
All right. You get this one.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful hand.
Did you listen to it
The first couple songs, yeah. The ones that are out now.
yet? Oh, yeah, because you can't get the full one.
I can't. It's not the first.
I keep on forgetting that.
Yeah, there was one that I really liked. What was that?
Okay. So it's working.
Brown song?
Oh,
I feel
everything over HTTPS is failing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Crayfish also.
Crayfishes too?
Yeah.
What?
The HTTPS API GitHub Town wrapper strict PHP to a simple could not be written crayfish wrapper.
Really?
It's not safe. It says default. I don't see a big error message, but I know it's
Good hear from me.
because the same thing tokens stay not such file directory.
It worked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After compose a download or transport section, maybe you had let that catch before.
Oh, I probably did. Well, it'll be a fun workshop.
We can talk with people about PCDM. Don't have to show them anything.
Yeah, we should be able to just do git and then the HTTPS URL branch or whatever.
It says to all students. It doesn't say anything about us. Besides, it's specifically addressed to students.
That one does,
It is beer. It is beer. Of course it's beer. It was a gift. It wasn't actually beer.
We'll see.
Yeah, it's a lot of efforts over that.
Yeah. Suddenly, with all these
What you gonna need today?
You gotta go through all the other same stuff.
I think, but probably, yeah, in fairly just sort of like, here's the spec question.
Yeah, it's not
comments.
as much meat.
What's that?
It's not as much meat to eat.
Well, even if there were more meat, the,
So is this all?
like, we can't do a group read.
No, it's literally just I can't.
Yeah, we eat the same.
We're the one effort.
Yeah, all like, sort of, yeah, put our mouths on one beat. At the same time.
You can stop. Did you already do that? I think it's worth actually finding all this.
This is the first one. I think we're talking to all of them, but in terms of credits, you're not gonna do a group read. Right?
No, but, well,
So,
Aaron wanted to talk about, item 2 and 5, but not sure how well I can participate.
well, actually,
On the agenda?
Yes. 2 and 5 would be.
The binary / description duality.
Oh, yeah.
And 5 is
Adam
atomy.
How much did you think of?
okay, it's not direct.
It's not public.
There's no direct drawing. Okay.
Well, except for the hydro stuff, obviously.
That's a reading for the other stuff.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But I think all these is
Yeah, I think that's 2 or 3 people going through.
So it's the-
Normal people.
Well, we can take the order of it, and we're just choosing
Very similar.
So he is applying for a track. Taking away from you my mouse. If he doesn't get that job, then he'll say you have some Elson. But he is my cousin.
Yeah, that was particularly authoritative because I think
I don't think I'm
neither.
that open door.
I knew very soon after I started working on it. I understand other people have worked on the project for years, but never really worked on it. Yeah, I got the full Adam experience. There were multiple kinds of preserved fish involved.
I didn't bother bringing it up. That's a cool city.
Is that in Austin or?
Salem, Massachusetts.
All right, shall we go ahead and, find the clock, as it were? As it was.
As it was.
Yeah, 64 minutes.
64?
64 minutes. It's a generous hour.
That's my kind of hour. All right, so, okay. Yeah, I was just sort of thinking through it. Yeah, so we have these spec documents. What's the most effective for everyone here? And I mean, so from my perspective, representing everyone in the community at large, we need these specs to be written. So on the one hand, I'm interested in getting these specs pushed forward. That's sort of a personal / community interest. But maybe in terms of this conversation, in addition to sort of maybe sparking interest and engagement there, I think it's worth just kind of like Adam was talking about eating meat, but sort of. Yeah, generally, we're not going to do a group read, as fun as that would be. We're not going to do it, but just sort of getting a general idea. Like these are the kind of the main things in each of the spec items. Maybe not spending a ton of time on it, and giving an opportunity for questions. If sort of kind of like we talked about with the versioning. If you have specific details that you have questions about, we can go into those. But otherwise, we'll just sort of move through the specs. It's kind of awareness. Some questions if there are questions, and with the underlying context of like somebody needs to help push these things forward, and like that means like humans, and we have a good selection of humans as it so happens here. Okay, and then we have other. We're not going to take up the whole 60 some odd minutes talking about specs. We need to talk about some other things too. So we'll kind of move through these. Okay, so maybe we'll just go through these in order. This one's pretty short. We could do a group read. We won't. Batch atomic operations. What do we see? The specification formerly known as transactions. But so, I mean, there are details here that we'll have to work out around atomicity. But basically, the idea is that you can start a transaction. All this is RESTful. You make a REST request that says I want to start a transaction or a batch or batch op, whatever we end up actually calling it. But you start a transaction. You can do any number of requests within that transaction scope, and then you can either commit or roll back that transaction. You can. There's a default amount of time that the transaction is alive, and if there's a period of inactivity and that time is exceeded, then by default that transaction gets rolled back. I think there was a comment that was made about static timeout, meaning that actually what I want is at a specific time, I want the transaction to roll back versus after 3 minutes. So instead of having a period of time after which of an activity rolls back at a specific time, it would roll back. John?
The only thing I would see for us is if we have any sort of scheduled server reboots or snapshots taken, that could be useful to have sort of all transactions in progress right now are going to be canceled. But I don't know that it's our highest priority.
That's a good point, then.
I think we can just make this a condition. You could say conditions may choose at a time of some kind.
I don't think
Yeah, but I think John's raising, well, maybe I'm gathering something slightly different from it, which is an ability to make a request saying, close out all transactions right now, which is a little bit different than the static timeout thing.
Yeah, because you could have an unscheduled reboot or something that you want to basically roll back.
Well, I think there, the need to say in the specification is that an implementation may choose to cancel a transaction for the reasons.
Sure.
That's all. We don't say anything more than that in the specification.
So not necessarily specifying how to do that.
That's
Just, an implementation.
But for some implementation, I would do servers.
Yeah, Ron?
I think that would be for us very useful because we have, we are uploading a lot of digitized books and we do page for page because we made a collection of pages, it's called a book, so we can have identified for each page. And so we always have the problem that when it's 500, 600 pages, in the middle of the uploading the books, there is breaking, and then you don't know where you are. We are now developing a lot of applications around that. It's keeping track what happened during the upload. I think that would help us a lot. But I don't know if it's really because it's a long period of time during the upload.
We have shown that you keep the transactions live. Like during the process, you can say, hey, keep the live, put it live.
Okay.
You can tell.
This would be very useful for us.
And I think that's a common use case, basically keeping the repository in a consistent state or a valid state. Like where you're building up something and it's sort of multiple resources that you're building a structure. And if any of those in the process of building up that structure, if anything goes wrong, you kind of want to wipe out the whole thing. Is that what you're describing?
Yes, but not only wipe out the whole thing, it's also would be very nice that we know the state, we know the point where it's broken, and then we can continue. That would be also possible for us. It's just a matter of at the moment we don't know exactly when we are doing the batch where it breaks, and we have a lot of artifacts which is incomplete.
So you're asking for something like continuation?
Yes, it could be. I think it could be on top of this possible.
I think that's actually, that's a really intriguing idea. I don't think it's quite the same thing as Atomistic. And what I'm saying is that I wouldn't want to put something like that in the specification.
Yeah.
That's very interesting functionality we should definitely talk about, but I don't think we can require other implementations to implement something that sophisticated. So.
Maybe you guys.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah. You had a comment.
Well, it was kind of like to what Adam was saying. It's one thing that concerns me is this bleed through of the referential integrity constraint and bumping up against it in different places that having to maintain referential integrity, I guess mostly due to the JCR underpinnings. It's an implementation issue, not an API issue. And that having to, this is just, seems to me to be moving this bleed through up to the next stage. And it seems to me that because you've got to maintain that in the current implementation, that this facility would be more easy to implement in APIX.
This, just like in general, transaction facility?
Yes. Because the APIX would, you're talking about in the internals requiring ACID semantics, but.
No, we're definitely not.
Okay, well.
That's why we're calling them batch atomic operations instead of transactions, even though we're calling them transactions, it seems.
Well, the notions of the APIX framework immediately starts to talk about having a reliable, rather than ACID transaction capability, that would allow you to do these types of operations, sequence them in such a way that they could be ingested. And clean up, of course, if it wasn't ingested. And then moving that down into the core, maybe asking the core to do too much.
But Dan, this is just, from a historical point of view, that's not what happened. This kind of functionality emerged as part of the specification process by use case, by very clear opinion that we got from the community, completely orthogonal to the API X effort. This is not something that was injected downwards from API X. This is something that originated as we decided to abstract over the current implementation. Began doing that.
Understood. I probably tried to fit too much into a short sentence. But notionally, it all comes down to wanting a certain batch that either all is done or everything is not.
No, or continuation, as Robin was saying. But so I mean, basically, at a general level, you're just suggesting that maybe transactions or batch topic operations don't need to be in the core.
Yeah, especially against the notion of a RESTful interface.
Well, that's definitely a different
transactions. Yeah.
It's true.
So on one hand, one hand is transactions don't need to be in the core, but then a lighter form of that is you personally just maybe don't care so much about transactions, versus I don't want them in the core.
No, I definitely need to use case of needing everything done or everything not done. The only question is where is this managed in what way?
Things that we would want to consider keeping this in the core.
Yeah, I don't know if people can hear you or not, Adam.
There are a few reasons we want to consider keeping this in the core, and amongst them are APIX is a very different effort. It's not supported by the same project, essentially. And people who are, very boldly paying for Fedora had asked for this, whereas the people who are paying for APIX are asking for different things. So when we hear clearly from users that we would like Fedora to do something, it's problematic, at least to me, to say, well, there'll be a sidecar project that's being maintained by a different group of people, a grant money, to do that. Now, that's not a complete answer to the challenge, but it's part of the reason that I think this stuff does need to stay.
Thanks, Adam.
Value for money. Fedora's all about.
Other batch atomic operation comments? I think we'll keep the pace a little bit quicker just for the sake of time. But I don't want to cut anyone off. Oops. No. Okay, authorization here. So the idea of authorization is basically it's based on the WebAC, which is a linked data flavor of or approach for doing authorization. Fedora is in the specification is not making any statements around authentication. But rather there's an expectation that all requests coming into Fedora are pre-authenticated, and Fedora is just enforcing sort of the rights or the permissions associated with any given request on a resource. So specifically, when a put or a post or a GET request is made on a resource, what action is trying to take place. There are attributes that come in with that request, like user ID or groups or just general attributes, and sort of taking those attributes, taking the resource, and taking the action that's being performed in that resource, combining all those together, and comparing that to the policy that has been established with WebAC. They say yes or no. And so the WebAC model, for those of you all who have not worked with it, or even if you have, basically you have another resource. Currently it's constrained to being in the repository, so all your policies are also in the repository. But you have a resource or a set of resources that define your policies, basically define those three characteristics, like what agents, and those agents are users or groups, effectively, what agents, what actions, and either what resources or what types of resources using RDF type. And then those policy, it's sort of a two-way mechanism where the target or the resource that's being protected points to its policies, but the policy also has to refer back to the resource either directly by saying I'm protecting this resource, or indirectly saying I'm protecting these types. So yeah, that's kind of the generality of the authorization functionality. So I guess in general around authorization, comments or questions about how it is, Peter? Yeah.
This is just a question about the mechanics. So the developer I'm working with is called Mike Lynch. He was trying to work out how you go from authenticating to just writing really simple Python client API to help do this stuff. How you actually kind of do an action on Fedora on behalf of a user. So he's authenticating Tomcat in the download, and he was really not documentation about how you assume. It's probably Mike, he's Australian. So he wasn't clear about how, and this is very early days for him, but trying to work out how you sort of assume the identity of a user. You're saying Fedora doesn't care, you just pass it as attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, that's this user role or whatever. But we couldn't figure out how to do that.
You couldn't figure out how to pass those attributes in?
Yeah, so it didn't seem clear.
Yeah.
You're just using the download, how you actually do that.
Using the download.
Using the downloaded, jar files and whatever.
You mean like using Fedora?
Yeah, using Fedora, yeah. So downloading one of the demo versions of Fedora and then actually trying to do that, it wasn't clear how to do it.
Okay, well, I mean, I can just say, which obviously is not going to help Mike Lynch right now, but so when you make a servlet request, there is like a user principal associated with that request, and that attribute is pulled out in the process of WebAC pulls out that piece of information from the request. Additionally, you can provide headers, and the actual name of those headers is completely up to you. That's configurable, and right now, for better or worse, that configuration has to be created build time. So you have to build from source to define the names of those headers, and then you can then the client side has to populate the values of that header, which also gets included in decision making. So that would maybe be like groups, or then there's also a on behalf of header, where if like maybe you have a super user that's actually the authenticated user making the request, but it's on behalf of Mike Lynch, goes in this on behalf of header, and so all of the authorization decisions get based on not the super user entity or principal making the request, but rather this on behalf of principle.
Okay.
So yeah, that doesn't help.
Well,
But
that's so there's a place that makes sense, right? So that answers the question. Way to do it.
yeah, so maybe suffice it to say there is an answer to the question, and let's work together, Mike, wherever you are.
Well, it's evening.
What's that?
It's evening on a public holiday, so I won't bother him right now.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm just sort of speaking to Mike.
Yeah.
In my heart. Yeah, let's
Can we touch?
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah, let's work together and get the documentation so the lynches of the future don't face the same challenge, and then specifically let's work out the problem that you guys are trying to work through. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Other people have worked with WebAC as it stands right now in Fedora. Did I miss or forget anything or mischaracterize anything in that explanation? All right. Yeah, go.
One question, comment, or whatever it fits basically.
Song?
The song at the same time. That's it related to something that Stefan did. And right now, the users and roles are treated as strings, right?
No.
They're not both agents, real resources inside.
Yeah. So you can do strings or URIs.
You can do both.
Yeah.
If you're using an unreleased version.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's
in master right now.
In master.
Okay, that makes
Right.
sense.
I mean, we're all running master.
Yeah. It will be in the 4.6, which is scheduled for right after this meeting.
Okay, that's the answer to my question.
Like when's the next year? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
We do plan on putting a 4.6 out as soon as possible. There is a release candidate policy which states 3 weeks of testing. So basically 3 weeks from Friday, or maybe more realistically Monday after this week. Yeah. We'll do a code freeze sometime next week, I guess, and then. Oh, any other comments on WebAC authorization, Fedora's commitments around that in terms of the specification? All right, keeping it going. So fixed checking, there are two flavors of this, on ingest and on demand. On ingest is pretty straightforward. There's a standard header that you pass in when you're doing an ingest event. And right now, SHA-1 is supported. And if the SHA-1 match that's calculated on server side, then you get you get an exception back, saying there's a mismatch. So that's simple on ingest. On demand is you basically at any point you can ask that Fedora basically verify that the checksum of the resource has not changed, and which basically means recalculating the checksum and comparing it to a stored value. The details of the specification go into sort of in an LDP, linked data platform friendly way, or just sort of patterns that are modeled on LDP, basically making requests that that perform the fixity and also store the result of the fixity as a new resource, so that over time you have a record in terms of the actual fixity results of when these fixity tests were run. I mean, sort of the details of the mechanics of it are interesting, and sort of the specification will, when it sort of makes its way out of the Google Doc phase, into a published spec, will fully detail sort of the mechanics of how do you do that, basically making requests on LDP containers associated with a resource to invoke the fixed service. But the point is that you can make a REST request asking that fixed be performed, and those results will be stored in the repository as well.
One of the questions I have really been struggling with is how the specification allows extendability to other checksums or even intra checks. Like if it's a video file saying I want to check this chapter only, like because a lot of that's tied in implementation details. But
if you look at the specification, the actual fixed key check is just an RDF thing. It's a what do we call it here? An LDP RF.
Yes.
Now, what kind of RDF is in that? Make really arbitrarily complicated descriptions.
Yeah, well, so you raised 2 points. One is extending algorithms. Right now, SHA-1 supported, and really SHA-1 supported because we kind of get that for free in the current implementation.
It wouldn't be hard to add other algorithms. We're reading the bits and passing them through a checksumming bit stream. You can do as many of those as you want. It adds very small.
Yeah, I was thinking more just how best to specify.
Yeah.
How one specifies the checksum, or
and I think that's
so for
a description of that, an ontology or something of that RDF document.
And for ingest, that's going to be an HTTP header because it's really not going to do that. For the
and that's part of the current API.
Right. We just don't have the support. Okay. For the on-demand stuff, that's the post button, which you said. Right now, we haven't said anything about this, but we could.
So maybe since you're very engaged in writing the spec, maybe that's
Why are you answering this question?
that's why I wanted it for a discussion, because I've been trying to think what to write about that.
And then the other is, sort of, if you have very large files, we were talking about this last night, it's maybe less useful if you have a checksum mismatch, like I have a terabyte file, you're saying I should check some mismatch, like how can I do something with that besides just like jump the whole thing and pull it from somewhere else. So maybe there are interesting academic sort of approaches for doing other things, so it's not just like a massive checksum, but maybe bits and pieces or something. But
extracting streams out of container formats like video files or whatever, or zip files or other archive files, and saying, give me checksums for pieces. That could be an interesting thing. And I don't know what the spec for that looks like.
That is an interesting thing to the AV community. There is no spec for it right now. That there are folks who are beginning to realize that this is utility we lack, and starting to work on it from that community. And the same with genomic specs, realizing that they need something that isn't just a checksum. They don't have it often. And I think we should be prepared to, not necessarily to do that work ourselves, but to accept it from this community.
Yeah, and I should say, related to that, I've heard in various guises requests for the underlying extraction functionality that would make doing some of this a lot easier. Things like, I want to upload a gigantic archive and I want to be able to pull a single file out of it. Or I want to upload a giant video file and I want to be able to pull just audio track in Portuguese. That's, I think, maybe an APIX kind of thing rather than a core thing.
Actually, for Gensio, I had a question. Sorry, Nick.
Well, actually, not one question, but three, and not exactly questions, but our use cases.
Yeah, okay.
So that may be useful for you to know. Working on this. First, our checksums for the European Union law are actually external signatures, XML files, that we check with a specific tool, which is in Java. It's just a Java application that might be plugged in other applications, and we are doing so. So it might be useful because not always is just a string, but a whole file which is next to it. The second thing that I wanted to say
And there's a particular technology or something associated with that?
That's a good question, but I have the whole specification if you are interested, and I believe that that is public. So I can provide that.
So is that XML signature that you're talking about?
Sorry?
That XML signature?
Yeah.
So Adrian, did you get that?
But I am not sure that it is using the XML sig, if you mean that specific.
I do mean that.
Yeah.
I am not sure that it is using exactly that.
Okay, but it's
But-
some kind of.
But still I have the whole, I mean, the whole thing is public.
Yeah, so
Just ask me, just send me an email and I will reply because it's on internet.
or can you just add it to a link to the wiki page, or do you have, are you like, for this
You
meeting?
can add it to the Google Doc because I have it open.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah, anywhere. So that's number one. You had two more?
Yeah, I have two more things. The second thing that I wanted to say, you said that there are two use cases on ingest and on demand. We have another, which is because this signature marks the PDF as legal value. There are many economic implications of that, and political implications. So we also run what we call an automatic fixity run. So every certain time, like maximum a year, there is an automated tool which runs all fixities.
Yeah.
So whenever a signature is has been checked for over like 6-7 months, it is going to be checked again by this tool, which is an external tool. So we developed.
Is that a flavor of on demand? It's just like on schedule demand?
Kind of. Yeah, it's something in the middle actually. It's a kind of on demand, but it's actually automated.
Yeah.
And there is another one, which is when
But
we do not rely or something has been changed, then we point at it and we say this first, and that is for me or for us the only one. So we made two flavors of on demand. I don't know if that is useful, but that is what we use.
So if you have like on demand, you can wrap that up in a current service and make it run easily without being writing.
Just taking into account this additional administrative metadata, which is just the date in which last was checked.
Yeah.
Fixity was last checked.
Yeah.
It's just the date.
There's gonna be a memento event.
Which on the Drupal store, and then you run it somehow.
Third thing.
Wait.
Oh,
For the
go
second
ahead.
thing, that was basically my question, is how does this tie to the audit service?
The audit service is like the different thing altogether.
But this stuff goes into the audit service, like
Well,
permit,
yeah.
like number two, premise fixity. So like any of this stuff that happens, it's gonna events.
Yeah, I think part of this design is that the fixity result documents are now actual documents.
Yeah.
And therefore they're generating events. So handled by the audit service, the same way any other.
Yeah.
specific
Okay.
events.
So they will, that this specification and this approach will generate events. Currently, the events aren't created for running fixity, which is not what
Should we
want.
add that as an item? Will generate events to this? Or is it like a given? that
It's not a bad thing. No.
Yeah, I think
Because that's certainly a flaw in the current implementation, that we knew we wanted to generate events for the fixity checks, and it didn't happen, partly because we expected further things down the road, partly because Ben Armiger's a busy person. So it didn't happen.
Number three?
Number three, we're in contact with some people about from the ISO 16363
Yes.
auditing, and they told us that it would be a good idea to check not only by documents, but also by collection, because we are very concerned about how complete collections are. And they recommended us to run checksums not only on documents, but also on collections when we deem them ready or full, you see?
So it's like a rolling checksum over a batch of resources?
At the level that you decide, that is completely open because that depends really strongly on the collection or on the type or on whatever.
And by collection, do you mean
That depends.
containers and properties possibly also? Because that's.
We always consider PDFs and metadata as well. That exists without the other.
So this seems similar to the section or portion or view of a file that you need some way to generate a representation that you can check the fixity of, and then you need some place to record that fixity as an event, and then a mechanism to check it. And so it seems like there's sort of a related thing there. Maybe a pattern could work for both of those things.
This is an idea that we haven't developed like at all, but it's something to keep in mind.
Okay. Yeah.
People have
Because
certainly asked
it
about
came really from the people who wrote this ISO 16363, and I thought it was.
people have certainly asked about fixity checking of RDF, and I can see how it would rapidly evolve to whole trees of data or arbitrary collections of data. Yeah.
So do you have like some implementation ideas about that? Running only on user provided triples or everything? There's some triples that Fedora provides that can change in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need a canonical representation of the RDF, which currently we don't. So that's the first step. And then like, what's the content of that canonical representation?
I have a question, sorry, always have a question about something that's related to fixity, but also to versioning, and that it's fixity at the end. Basically, with Fedora 4, if a binary gets corrupted, you have no way of using the same Fedora 4 to recover it, because they're all same pointers to the same file always. You can make many versions and try to preserve them, but it will always point to the same corrupted file if it gets corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you know of any standard that other applications have to using headers to communicate with Fedora when you have an external source? For example, when you use Amazon S3, the S3, the buckets give you back a header that contains the checksum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a standard way of it to send those only stuff, because right now we don't have a way of fixing checking for external sources. It makes no sense. We can check them, but maybe we can retrieve them using the standard way. Are you aware of any standard about that?
Definitely not. Yeah, and I'd be like, we can't obviously do anything about that, or like, except for say we wish that there were a standard, and maybe here is an approach to a standard or a proposal, but what the world
But
does.
at least in terms of this text, maybe we can say, at least documenting, it's like we expect that an external application sends us this header with this fixity, if it's a standard.
Swift does self-healing.
Yeah.
OpenStack Swift.
Because then we can build like even a wrapper in between the client that makes that transformation and sends back to the local.
Yeah. Well, so just a second, Mike. So you're saying, Nick, that there are systems that do self-healing?
Yeah, OpenStack Swift does.
And
so if Swift and S3 do it, then if they do it the same way, then it would be a de facto standard.
Which is different though than how do you make a request to an external system like S3 or Swift? And is there a standardized way of getting the header back or getting the checksum back, presumably in a header? That's standard. Or unless I'm missing something.
No, I think that's exactly it.
Yes.
Mike?
I was just gonna make the question, is our handling of external resources something that's made in the spec?
Yes, there's a note or like a bullet point like about the external message body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, because we theoretically could make the we could do fixity checking on that. We could add that to the spec to create to create a resource that has the fixity you computed at a certain time about an external resource may be useful. I mean, that's metadata. I mean, the implementation is maybe heavy in that we have to pull that resource from the external thing to calculate the checksum. But that's something people are probably going to do anyway. Mm-hmm. So having a repository do it, it's not terribly costly to implement. Storing it in the repository is a very reasonable place to put that stuff. And then, I don't know.
Part of me wants to defer to the external storage checksum, because as soon as you start retrieving it and then calculating a checksum, you aren't talking about the actual file that's in the external storage, you're talking about retrieved file.
But if you have an internal system, oftentimes you can't trust that anyway. So like most systems will cache a lot of systems will cache a checksum. There's no, in like the preservation world, you sort of want to verify anyway. If it says it has a checksum, but they always corrupt it when they send it back, it's no good. I mean, if you can't retrieve it and compute a checksum on it, it doesn't matter if they have a checksum and they say the file's valid.
So what you're suggesting a possibility of, Mike, is that so just for people's information, there is a mechanism that will be part of specification for basically external data streams. You have sort of binaries that are not in the repository, but you have objects that point to those external binaries, and actually you can make requests on those binaries into the repository, and basically just get a redirect to wherever that binary is actually getting served up from. Like that exists. It will be part of the specification. What you're suggesting, Mike, is, if I understand, maybe in addition to how we specify, well, this is how you create that situation, or you basically how you do a post request into the repository and specifying the URL for something external. Like this is how you do that. Maybe as a part of that, you could also specify the checksum, which gets stored in the repository, and that stored checksum, we could also say for external content that the content's read in and compared to that checksum as one approach, or we just specify when you create the external, the object that points to something external, you can say, I want you to maybe initially calculate the checksum from the external system, store that, but in either case, you have a stored value in the repository and mechanics for reading in the external content and comparing to that stored value. That's sort of putting on the table the possibility of having Fedora be responsible for, or at least in the specification, specifying how external content could potentially be verified by the repository itself.
And if we're supporting
and Arminter. Sometimes when people come in, music plays. Hi.
I need to interject.
Please.
When I was talking about the Swiss stuff, Aaron pointed out something that I probably should have said, is that
he can hear you? Like, it's that good? It's that good? Aaron?
It's that great.
Wow.
Is that depending on how many nodes you have set up, so it's going to go around, it's going to ask all the nodes. So the way I'll talk about this when I present in a couple days, we have 5 geographic nodes, so it's going to go around and say, who has the right one? So it kind of determines consensus, and then based on that, we'll do healing if it needs to be healed. So I don't know, that might kind of throw a wrench.
Yeah, just complicate the mic scenario you're saying?
Or the original scenario. Because there's no, like, what nodes are we going to compare to? If it's just like one Fedora. And how would we do self-healing?
Well, self-healing is that's like a totally different topic, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like, in terms of specifying, are we, I'm not sure I'm hearing self-healing. Yeah, but that's one topic. The other topic that you're raising, Aaron, is it seems like in a clustered scenario, possibly. And sort of what of those copies, what do you what are you reading in to compare it to the stored value? Is that what you're saying, Aaron?
Wait for him to say something.
But it seems like it's a complexity. And just sort of looking at the clock, maybe we'll move on. So for your benefit, Ben, can you just sort of, while I'm going through tabs here, can you introduce yourself and maybe it seems like you have someone else with you, maybe the introduction? My back's to you, but
I'm Ben. I'm at Columbia. I've been a Fedora committer for a while. I think I might have written that document that you just had up on the screen.
Aaron said yes, my cluster.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, I was the 451 release manager, I guess technically, although I think I got Jared to do almost all the work.
True release manager.
That's management. Yeah. It's the release delegate.
Which I helped Jared.
And
you guys hate me because
no.
Okay, good.
I feel like it might be worth observing that that scenario that Nick was just describing by proxy was one of the first implementations of fixity that we had in Fedora 4. And even then, you're always, unless you're going to completely leak all of your storage cluster out to all the clients, there's always a single point of communication that comes in. Like any kind of self-healing you do that involves building consensus around that has to be hidden, or you just have some storage transparency that doesn't seem to be what people expect from a system like this. So, but we have some. But it also means if we dig back, we have some actual working code about how to coordinate stuff like that by listing the message queue in response to a failed fixity check request. So you don't have to build it into the API, but we have a pattern.
Thank you, Ben. I missed, was there another introduction that I missed, or am I seeing, is there a vision of a person sitting next to you?
This is Dr. Vimala Pashupati. She's an early modernist who's come along to do some work in the National Library of Ireland, and we've not really had time to get lunch. And I thought maybe the best way to sort out a lunch plan would be to hook up with the group that was about to go get lunch in 20 minutes.
Excellent plan. We look forward to having lunch together. All right, so we only have 15 minutes left, and there are two topics, Matthias's topic and Jeff's topic, that I think we just need to at least touch on. But before touching on those topics, I'll just sort of mention. Did you have something, Nick?
Are you Frodo?
Oh, no, I am.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's very reasonable. Never mind.
We didn't go into detail on messaging. We didn't go into detail on CRUD, which is like CRUD is the meat. Yeah, the meat.
I don't really need that feature.
And we didn't do versioning. So basically, we didn't do discovery. Maybe I would suggest ignore that. Although maybe some people say don't ignore it, but that's not a part of the spec as it stands right now, at least.
You're saying that it should be replaced.
Yeah, it's a tombstone.
It's a tombstone.
More confusing.
Yeah.
This is a deletable stone. That's what it says.
Oh, I thought it was there until people just stopped asking.
Yeah, so it's a self-healing tombstone. All right. So the two other topics the two other topics were, we just don't have enough time together.
Federation.
Yes, projection federation as it relates to kind of as mode shape is evolving. And then the other, it was around performance testing that has taken place. So maybe just in 5 minutes or maximum 7, talk about projection and federation, what's going on there. And I can say some things about that, and then I'm sure there are others that can also sort of chip in ideas about kind of what's going on there, and then I know Matthias maybe and others might have just kind of questions in general. So just a little bit of background. There are and have been a lot of goodies that ModeShape gives us, and early on we were tempted to pass those on to the users and call them features. Then we recognize that like passing these things on, there's a certain responsibility that comes with that, and it makes it very difficult, like if the underlying system changes, to maintain those guarantees. And so, I mean, that's a lot of what we're talking about here with the specification. Like, these are the core capabilities. Like, these features are what make Fedora. These are the things that you should be able to rely on over time as services that this is the role Fedora plays in your environment. This is what it is to do Fedora, these services. One feature, one goodie that we got for free was something called federation, a very overloaded, confusing term. Maybe a way of characterizing it is that is slightly more clear is projection. Basically, you can project over other systems, including like a file system, and the resources in that other system would show up in Fedora, like as kind of first-class resources. It's useful for a lot of reasons. We even had a call last week at the Fedora Tech Call where some folks from the University of Pennsylvania were expressing their use case around projection in federation. So this capability is not something that like it falls in the same category as like a RESTful service that you can abstract around sort of a RESTful user interaction. Like it's kind of like a back end implementation that has some benefits, but it's not the sort of RESTful service specification type of thing. Where the conversation, the direction it's been going, for a number of reasons, and even most recently in last week's tech call, was the recognition that this projection is not core. It's not like a core Fedora capability, like in core code. Although right now at this moment, it is in the core code base. Very soon, like in the next month, if not sooner, maybe even already. Projection is going to be extracted from the core code base, and not deleted, but extracted from the core code base. Like many features have been extracted from the core code base, made an optional feature that is dependent upon a particular implementation of the Fedora specification, namely the ModeShape implementation, and like other such features, we do have a web app that you can build or that will be built for you on each release that includes these bonus features. And Federation would be in that category. So like for the ModeShape implementation, as long as ModeShape supports it, we will have this optional feature that we will provide build artifacts for, from this supported version of Fedora that will have projection in it as long as projection's around. There is some Fedora shimming in there too, and there are folks that have expressed interest in being the maintainers of that piece of code. It's not the responsibility of sort of the core Fedora committer team, unless people in the core committer that team want to take on that responsibility. But just like all of these external optional features, they need to have designated, documented owners, maintainers, and so this falls in that category. I'll pause. But you'd raised a question, Matthias. I don't know if maybe I was.
I think it's been around as a feature, and I think it's a very intriguing. Well, you call it feature or, and I think it's just. It was always a bit mysterious if it's actually existing, if you can use it. There was an issue with the documentation that was not accessible. So it seemed to be this very miraculous thing, and I just wanted to understand what's going on. And
I think it's too good to be true.
We like to maintain an air of mystery.
I mean,
that's. I think you're doing a great job.
Mike does have a pertinent question, or a comment rather.
I was just saying it was too good to be true, and it never worked in the fullest sense, or even in anyone's use case. I mean,
it was what
you can see stuff there.
Yeah.
It was great for a demo. It was not working. You can't add links to things. You can't actually make relationships between federated resources and other resources, which makes them essentially worthless in your like data platform. Might as well put them out in the repository. And I'm glad we're embracing the external approach, so at least we have some way for people who have massive amounts of files that want them immediately in their repository. There's a way to do it.
But there are at least some people interested in maintaining it in some way.
Do they know
as a discovery platform?
Yeah, they were on the call.
Do they know that how it works? Are they using it, or do they just think
they're using it now?
Yeah.
But they have like they haven't scaled the way you have, and they haven't seen the same kinds of problems that you have.
I mean, should I write up some of the bugs I've discovered that I haven't even bothered reporting because I didn't think anyone was using it? I mean,
yes, please do.
Okay. It just seems like there's enough that it's clear that I can't recommend anyone use it, and I had to migrate away from. I'm in the process of migrating away from using it.
So we don't intend on continuously using it into the future. It's something we use at the moment is going to stop happening.
Yeah, and it's not that hard to change to just post those files on Apache or something and then reference them.
You have situations where you have directories where things would appear and disappear.
Yeah, there's certain file names that don't work. There's a lot of file names that don't work. There's if you have two files with the same SHA-1 in the same directory, Federation breaks completely. The file they just never load. Anyway, I don't need to talk about this very long, but if anyone's interested, I can tell you, and I should probably document it.
Well, I have a note to encourage you to do that.
If there are people who are serious about it, I should definitely talk to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I think there are several people who have been intrigued by the possibilities there, and
it's poison.
I think so.
Yeah, so some sort of documentation on the wiki, and then also explaining sort of how it's external and how it will be managed going forward. If the community steps, or if there some folks in the community that step up to commit to maintaining it. So that's federation / projection. Then there was another topic of performance and what's the current status of things, and just to give you all a break, maybe I'll ask Esme to share his voice.
Sure. Andrew mentioned earlier that we had a group of people who have been meeting monthly. We've developed a few sort of profiles for the main operations we expect to take, and some JMeter test suites for testing some of that. I'd say the work so far has been getting a few different people to run those tests on a couple of different deployments and report them sort of as a baseline for what the existing code base is doing. Recently, there's been a little bit of work on testing the Mochik 5 branch to see how it's different and see if there are any big issues or improvements. I don't think we have any really conclusive information yet. I think we've seen some issues with ModeShape 5. We've seen ModeShape 5 do better at some things.
Have we seen issues with ModeShape 5?
Well, there was the Federation thing and the not starting up. I mean, ModeShape 5.0 has a showstopper bug that we're waiting for a fix, but it's the fix is in master. We're waiting for a release of it. We thought there was an issue with the file system federation, but that seems to not be an issue. That was a configuration issue. But these are the kind of things we're looking for to try to identify these things in testing instead of making a release and having people find them with their repositories. Obviously, that's never good. So we're finding those, and we want to find more about and get a good understanding of the sort of the current performance and what ModeShape 5 does, and going forward to find bottlenecks and find good documentation for what the performance characteristics are, what kind of JVM settings and what kind of hardware and what kind of other things can improve or impact performance. And of course, improve performance ideally over time and get rid of those bottlenecks and make things better.
So that's a bit about the kind of the process and the framework. Do you have any details of like what were we seeing?
Well, I would say with ModeShape 4, we had LevelDB as it performed better than Postgres and MySQL for sort of raw performance for the tests that we were doing, but it didn't scale as well. I definitely saw in my tests at Princeton that Postgres started out slower, but went slow and steady and scaled much better. And LevelDB started fast and then fell over before you got to 1 million objects created, for example. So far, ModeShape 5 with Postgres has been performing as well as LevelDB and scaling much better than LevelDB or Postgres with ModeShape 4. But that's one test on one site. So I hope other people will test it, and I hope to do more tests, and hopefully that keeps on being true. What we've seen so far about ModeShape 5 is we've seen a few things that have been resolved with updating the code or updating the configuration. We haven't seen any real problems with it. What I've seen has been very promising.
And so these tests are scripted, using JMeter. So the idea is that we can anyone can spin them up and reproduce the results that others are seeing. One takeaway, not necessarily out of the performance and scalability team itself, but something that we've seen that kind of relates is this LevelDB. By default, LevelDB is a database that is where your objects are stored in Fedora. We've seen issues with it around corruption in particular, like in certain scenarios where if your Tomcat runs out of memory and you're doing something that then that LevelDB gets into a funky state that is to date very difficult to get out of, and I'm not sure we've demonstrated being able to get out of it without just pulling a backup. So the point is, it's best not to use LevelDB and, as a general recommendation. This next release that will be coming out, basically that default configuration that spins up LevelDB for you is being removed in this in the release that will come out after open repositories, and which means that when you start up Fedora, you'll get an error saying you need to configure a backend, as opposed to just like having LevelDB start it for you. You'll get an error that says, you need to set this configuration element to configure your backend. And so we've had much better success with Postgres or MySQL, and those are supported. There are out-of-the-box configurations that you can just specify in that system property, so that then you connect to Postgres or MySQL instead of LevelDB. So for new installations, which is the majority of folks here in this room, that you'll probably just not even have to worry about it. You'll just start up using MySQL or Postgres. For folks who currently have Fedora 4 and Mike is going through this process now. It's a migration, right? You're migrating from level DB Fedora 4 repository into a Fedora 4 repository that has another backend MyStore or something, Aaron?
Wait, so what's happening in the self-contained jar, like for people who want to try it out quickly and have something running?
Yeah, so in the one-click, it is configured still, and it will continue to be configured with a database that just spins up. So right now it is still level DB. We might put in like another Derby or something. Any JDBC database you can plug in. So the one-click still has it, and I was thinking of, I think that's the normal Fedora War has the configuration removed, and also the Web App Plus has the configuration removed.
Yeah, so it'll just be the one click, and it'll have some sort of embedded quick start configuration. But I think that is maybe more clear that it's not a thing that you should use in production. The default Fedora War file, I think, is the one where people would be very tempted and reasonably expect to be able to download it and use it in production. And if you don't get an error, how would you know that you are using something that's not supported or recommended?
Ben?
I was just agreeing. I guess the only other, there are 6 tests. We have JMeter tests written for 4 of them. So we need 2 more tests written. Test number 4, which is how many containers you can add, is pretty much, we're about ready to report out with that. We have the report page. And so we don't have any MySQL results in there. So that's probably, I have to do that. And then we meet again Friday the 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So it's the normal Fedora Tech call online. So if you want to join, listen in, just go for it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Just one other question. You mentioned baselining. You mean baselining 4, and this is not comparing 4 versus 3 in any aspect, at least at this point, right?
There hasn't. Quite a while ago, there was a little bit of work to compare 3 to 4. I think Fedora 3 was a little bit faster, but scaled less well, if I remember correctly.
And it depends on the operation. I think some operations were better, faster response time in 3, and some faster 4. It kind of depended.
I also remember different things like
over time,
reads versus writes. Like Fedora 4 handled writes better, more scalable, and Fedora 3 handled reads better, but after you scaled, it got slower. It was.
Yeah, the other thing to mention is when we're doing the tests, we're usually uploading like the log files and the JMeter or out or whatever. Is somebody is volunteered, or I can't remember who's going to do it, but it's Scott. To have like an R script to go through and just have nice graphs for every single one of them, so you have that visual cue.
Okay, well, I mean, it was kind of just a survey of a few things that are going on right now. I appreciate the feedback, as I suspect others appreciate the feedback. And then I guess in terms of parting comments, it's all about engagement. It's all about the community. I appreciate you all being here now, and I if only I knew the words to express. I could sing, I could do haiku, but in the absence of that, I'll just say that please be engaged, and that can be on the mailing list, that can be in the wiki, making comments, that can be showing up at these various meetings, but it's a community, and it makes it much easier if the community is sort of interacting versus a subset of the community trying to guess what the rest of the community is up to and needs. Any other parting bets?
I know I missed almost the whole meeting, but.
But when you were here, it was really
golden,
awesome.
Did we talk about an acceptance process for the specifications?
We did not talk about an acceptance process.
We talked about the fact that they needed work to make them done.
We are so far away from having something that could begin an acceptance process.
Here's the thing that I'm worried about. I think some of them, in particular the CRUD refinements, which are mostly just like upgrading the degree requirement on the code words in the LDP spec. Some of those are going to become dependencies for other parts of the spec. So we may want to push that conversation forward a little bit.
Are you suggesting that the timing needs to be arranged?
Like in dependencies?
With ordering?
Yeah, it's just the CRUD spec in particular. I'm afraid it's going to be difficult to write the other specs without being able to rely on at least a working draft of the CRUD spec.
Yeah, that's very true. Do we have an order for the CRUD spec right now?
We had an owner that got it to the point where it is right now,
Maybe you don't have.
and we have him in the back of the room.
Do you want to take it forward? Give it time to do it?
Yeah. Although
Get to work.
here's the thing I'm worried about. Right now, the same person has contributed most of the text to the CRUD, the versioning, and the fixes. Which is fine.
You're saying they have a bus problem.
That person is very opinionated and is happy to get those opinions out there, but.
Just be glad you left your mark.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but yeah, so, and then specifically, we can talk about, if there's anything I can do to help out with the process. Thanks, Ben.
If we can get the CRUD spec and one other, let's say version, because it's the farthest along, to a point where an acceptance process needs to be interesting, and that's, I think, the point at which we actually should talk about that.
Yeah.
And that's not too far off, but it's not immediate.
That's fine. I'll soon be back in this room.
Any other comments before we part?
Probably in less than an hour.
All right, well, thanks, everyone. Sorry it was sort of, like a whirlwind.
It's because so much is being done.
So much. See you later, Aaron.
I'm going to.